She's dying. Theron Ashmore knows this the moment he finds her, half frozen, beaten bloody, barely breathing in the snowdrift at the edge of his estate. He should leave her. He should ride on. He doesn't. They say the Duke of Ravencross never smiled anymore. Not since the fever took his daughter 3 years ago. Not since the music died in Silver Hollow Manor. The servants whispered that he wandered the halls at night, stopping outside the old music room where little Ophelia used to sing, her voice bright as morning bells. But the door stayed locked now, gathering dust and sorrow. So when Theron Ashmore found the woman in the snow that January night in 1809, half frozen and bleeding, he didn't think about fate or second chances. He thought about death, how close it had come to claiming another soul on his land, under his watch. "Stay with me," he commanded, though her eyes were already closing. "That's an order." Strange, how a man who hadn't cared about much of anything for 3 years could suddenly care so fiercely about a stranger's life. She woke 3 days later with no idea who she was. The housekeeper, Mrs. Penrose, sat beside the bed in the guest chamber, knitting by candlelight. When the young woman's eyes fluttered open, Mrs. Penrose nearly dropped her needles. "Oh, thank the Lord. Dr. Wickham. She's awake." The woman stared at the ceiling, then at her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse, confused. Where am I?" "Silver Hollow Manor, dear. You safe now? His Grace found you half dead in the snow 3 nights past. You were badly hurt." "His Grace? The Duke of Ravencross. This is his estate." The woman touched her head, wincing at the bandages. I can't remember. My name. I don't know my name." Dr. Wickham entered then, a kind-faced man in his 50s. He examined her carefully, asked her questions. She knew what year it was, New England was at war with France, could recite poetry and identify the flowers in the painting on the wall. But her own name? The faces of her family? Where she'd come from? Gone. All of it, gone like smoke. "The mind protects itself sometimes," Dr. Wickham said gently. "From trauma too terrible to face all at once. Give it time. The memories may return. But what if they didn't? What if she was nobody forever?" That night, unable to sleep, she wrapped herself in a borrowed dressing gown and wandered the manor's corridors. Her feet seemed to know where they wanted to go, even if her mind didn't. She found herself drawn to a particular door, locked, but with light showing underneath. She pressed her ear against it and heard something that made her heart ache, a music box, playing a lullaby. The music stopped abruptly. Footsteps. The door swung open, and she found herself face to face with the Duke of Ravencross. He was younger than she'd imagined, perhaps 35, with dark hair silvered at the temples and eyes that looked haunted. He stared at her as if she were a ghost. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I heard the music. I didn't mean to intrude." He should have been angry. Instead, something flickered across his face, surprise, pain, something almost like hope. You're drawn to music?" "I suppose so. I don't know why." Theron stepped back, opening the door wider. "This was my daughter's room. I come here sometimes. When I can't sleep." He paused. "You're not intruding." The room was a shrine to a little girl who'd loved life fiercely. Drawings on the walls. A small pianoforte in the corner. Shelves of music books. And everywhere, the feeling of absence, of a voice that should be singing but wasn't. She had a beautiful spirit, the woman said softly, though she didn't know how she knew this. She did. Theron's voice broke slightly. She loved to sing. Every morning, every evening. The house was full of music. And then. He didn't finish. The woman found herself standing at the pianoforte. Her fingers touched the keys without thinking, and a melody emerged, simple, haunting, in a minor key. Then she began to sing, words in Italian she didn't consciously remember knowing. Theron froze. The woman's voice, it was extraordinary. Pure and achingly beautiful, with a control and richness that spoke of years of training. It filled the room, the manor, the hollows in his chest he'd thought would stay empty forever. When she finished, tears were streaming down her face though she didn't know why. That was. Theron's voice was rough with emotion. Where did you learn to sing like that? I don't know. I don't remember. But it felt like coming home. Over the following weeks, music became the key that unlocked fragments of her past. She couldn't remember her name, but she could sing arias in 4 languages. Couldn't recall her family, but her fingers knew complex piano compositions without sheet music. Theron found her humming folk songs while helping Mrs. Penrose arrange flowers, performing Handel while bathing, unconsciously harmonizing with the church bells on Sunday mornings. You were trained, Theron said one evening as they sat in the music room, no longer locked, no longer silent. Extensively. That level of skill doesn't come from casual lessons. Then why was I running through a snowstorm? Why was I beaten? She touched the fading bruises on her arms, the cut above her eyebrow that would leave a scar. What was I running from? The nightmares gave clues. She'd wake screaming about locked doors, about a man's angry voice demanding she sing, about cold water rising around her ankles. About someone, Lysander, the name always Lysander, telling her she was worthless, that she belonged to him, that she'd do as she was told. Lysander, Theron repeated, setting his solicitors to work. That's a start. But it was the locket that changed everything. Mrs. Penrose found it while cleaning the dress the woman had been wearing, torn and blood-stained, they'd almost thrown it out. The locket had been sewn into the hem, hidden carefully. Inside was a miniature portrait of a woman with kind eyes and the inscription, "To my dearest Seraphina, with all my love, Mother." Seraphina, the woman whispered, staring at the portrait. Is that me? Is that my name? Something flickered in her mind, a memory of that woman singing while braiding her hair, of being called, "my little nightingale," of warmth and safety and love. Then it slipped away like water through her fingers. Seraphina, Theron said gently. It suits you. But I don't remember her. My own mother, and I don't remember her face except in this tiny painting. You will, he promised. In time. He started calling her Seraphina, though she felt like an imposter wearing someone else's name. But as the weeks passed and spring crept toward Yorkshire, she began to feel less lost. Silver Hollow Manor became home. Mrs. Penrose became family. Dr. Wickham's visits became bright spots in her week. And Theron. Theron became everything. She didn't mean for it to happen. He was a duke, far above her station, wherever that station might be. He was grieving, still healing from his daughter's death. But when he sat beside her at the piano, turning pages while she played, when he requested songs and actually smiled at the lively ones, when he told her that her voice had brought light back into his life. How could she not fall in love with him? And he was falling too, though it terrified him. Seraphina wasn't Ophelia, she shouldn't be, a replacement for his lost daughter. But she'd reminded him that life could hold beauty again, that Silver Hollow could be filled with music and laughter, that his heart wasn't as dead as he'd believed. Sing for me, he asked one April evening, rain pattering against the windows. She sang Schubert, a lullaby about wandering and finding home. When she finished, Theron was standing very close, his eyes dark with emotion. Seraphina, I. The knock at the front door shattered the moment. The man who stood in Silverhollow's entrance hall was everything Theron despised on sight. Lysander Gravesend, Viscount Gravesend, was handsome in a cold way, blonde, elegant, with eyes like chips of ice. He carried himself with the arrogance of old money and older cruelty. "I've come for my sister," he announced. "I believe you're harboring her." Seraphina, drawn by the commotion, appeared at the top of the stairs. When she saw Lysander, every drop of color drained from her face. She swayed, gripping the banister. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. There you are, Seraphina." Lysander's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You've caused quite the trouble, running away like that. Time to come home." Memories crashed through her like breaking glass. Lysander's fists. Lysander's voice screaming that she was worthless except for her voice. Lysander dragging her to meet Lord Malachi Draven, that horrible man with wandering hands and predatory eyes, announcing she'd been sold, yes, sold, for £5,000 and a business arrangement. Her own brother, trading her like property. She'd refused. She'd fought. Lysander had beaten her, locked her in the cellar. She'd escaped through a window, cutting herself on broken glass, and run into the winter night with nothing but the clothes on her back and her mother's locket sewn into her dress. And now he'd found her. "She's not going anywhere with you," Theron said, his voice deadly quiet. Lysander's eyebrows rose. "I beg your pardon, Your Grace, but Seraphina is my ward. My sister. She's mentally unwell, prone to flights of fancy and hysteria. I have every legal right. You have no rights here." Theron descended the stairs, placing himself between Lysander and Seraphina. "She's under my protection now." "Protection?" Lysander laughed. "How noble. But the law is quite clear. Seraphina is unmarried, under 25, and therefore my responsibility. Unless you're suggesting something improper about your protection." The threat was clear: cooperate or I'll destroy her reputation. "I remember," Seraphina said suddenly, her voice shaking but growing stronger. "I remember everything now. You stole Mother's inheritance, £20,000 left to me in trust. You've been taking my performance earnings for years, every penny I made singing at concerts and salons. And when that wasn't enough, you sold me to Lord Draven like I was a piece of furniture." Lysander's mask slipped, showing the monster beneath. "Careful, sister. You're making serious accusations." "Am I?" She descended the stairs, Theron steady beside her. "You told me Lord Draven owns performers. That he keeps them locked in his theatre, forces them to work until they collapse. That he'd break me until I obeyed. And you didn't care, as long as you got your money. You can't prove any of this." "Actually," Theron said softly, "she can. My solicitors have been quite busy these past weeks. Once we had your name, Viscount Gravesend, it was fascinating what we discovered. The fraudulent trust management. The forged documents. The witnesses who heard you threaten your sister. And Lord Draven's reputation is even more interesting. He's wanted in 3 counties for illegal contracts and imprisonment." Lysander's face went purple. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Leave now, and I'll give you a head start before I send this evidence to the magistrate. Stay, and I'll have you arrested where you stand." For a long moment, Lysander stared at his sister with pure hatred. Then he smiled, cold, cruel. "You think you've won? Draven won't let this go. He paid for you, Seraphina. He'll come to collect what he bought. And when he does, not even a duke's protection will save you." He left, his parting words hanging like poison in the air. Lord Malachi Draven arrived exactly 1 week later. He was a large man, running to fat, with small mean eyes and too many rings on his fingers. He arrived with 4 rough-looking men, hired muscle, clearly, and demanded Seraphina be surrendered to him immediately. I paid good money for her, he said, as if this were a reasonable argument. She's mine. Human beings, Theron replied, his hand resting on the pistol at his belt, cannot be bought or sold in England, Lord Draven. I suggest you leave while you still can. Bold words from a man who's harboring stolen property. She's not property. She's a person. And if you don't leave my land immediately, you'll discover exactly how protective I can be. Draven smiled unpleasantly. Perhaps. But estates are vulnerable, Your Grace. Fires start so easily. Accidents happen. People disappear. I always collect what's owed to me. He left, but the threat hung heavy. Theron immediately increased security, more groundskeepers, guards at night, dogs patrolling the perimeter. He insisted Seraphina never walk alone, never go into town unaccompanied. I've made your life a nightmare, Seraphina said one evening, her voice small. You should let me go. I could travel to Scotland, find work somewhere he'd never look. Absolutely not. Theron. No. He took her hands, his grip warm and sure. Do you know what you've given me, Seraphina? These past months. You've given me back music. Joy. Hope. You've reminded me that life can be beautiful again. Do you honestly think I'd let you walk away now? That I'd let that bastard win? But I'm nobody, she whispered. A penniless woman with no family, no prospects. You Seraphina Gravesend, he interrupted fiercely. You're the woman who survived abuse and betrayal and found the courage to run into a snowstorm rather than surrender your freedom. You're brilliant and talented and kind. And I. He took a shaky breath. I love you. God help me, I love you so much it terrifies me. She stared at him, tears spilling over. You can't. I'm not. I can't replace Ophelia. You're not replacing anyone. You yourself, and that's who I fell in love with. Marry me, Seraphina. Let me protect you legally, permanently. Let me spend the rest of my life hearing you sing. She kissed him instead of answering, and the kiss said yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. They should have known Draven wouldn't give up so easily. The engagement was announced. The banns were being read. In 3 weeks, Seraphina would become the Duchess of Ravencross, legally protected, forever beyond Draven's reach. They thought they'd won. They were wrong. It happened on a Tuesday evening, while Theron was meeting with his steward about crop rotations. Seraphina was walking in the garden with Mrs. Penrose, admiring the roses, when the men came. They were fast, efficient, brutal. One knocked Mrs. Penrose unconscious before she could scream. Another clapped a chloroform-soaked cloth over Seraphina's face. By the time the guards realized something was wrong, the carriage was already racing down the road. Theron's roar of rage could be heard throughout the manor. Get every man, every horse, he commanded, his voice deadly calm despite the terror in his eyes. Now. Send riders to alert the magistrate and the militia. If they've hurt her, I'll kill them all myself. Dr. Wickham was tending to Mrs. Penrose's head wound. She'll be all right, Your Grace. She's already coming around. Where would Draven take her? Theron demanded. His theatre in York, Mrs. Penrose said groggily, struggling to sit up. He has a theatre there. The Obsidian Stage. Everyone knows it's where he keeps his performers. Locked in the upper floors. Theron's blood ran cold. How far? 2 hours hard ride. Then we leave immediately. The obsidian stage was exactly as terrible as Seraphina had imagined. She woke in a small room with barred windows, her head pounding from the chloroform. The door was locked. From somewhere below, she could hear music, a piano, voices singing, the sounds of an evening performance. Lord Draven entered without knocking. Awake at last. Good. We have a performance tonight, and you're the star attraction. I won't sing for you, Seraphina said, her voice steady despite her fear. Never. Oh, you will. Or I'll send men back to Silver Hollow to finish what we started. Mrs. Penrose is still alive, isn't she? And that housekeeper. And the good doctor. It would be tragic if something happened to them because of your stubbornness. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. Now, you'll go downstairs, you'll perform beautifully, and then we'll discuss the terms of your new contract. 20 years should suffice. He left, locking the door behind him. Seraphina paced the small room like a caged bird, her mind racing. She wouldn't give in. She'd die before she let Draven control her. But how could she escape? The window was too high, the bars too strong. The door was solid oak with a lock she couldn't pick. The only way out was through. When Draven's men came to escort her downstairs, she didn't fight. She walked calmly down to the theatre, onto the stage where a full house waited. Wealthy men in expensive clothes, expecting to be entertained by the Duke of Ravencross's stolen bride-to-be. The scandal alone would sell tickets for months. Draven stood in the wings, smiling triumphantly. The pianist began the introduction. Seraphina opened her mouth to sing. And screamed instead. Not in fear, but in rage, a wordless, piercing scream that shattered the evening's illusion. The audience stirred uncomfortably. Draven's face went red. You want me to sing? Seraphina shouted. Fine. I'll sing. She launched into a bawdy tavern song, crude and inappropriate, deliberately terrible. Then switched mid-verse to a funeral dirge. Then to a children's nursery rhyme. She sang discordantly, mockingly, making a farce of Draven's grand evening. The audience began to laugh, but not with enjoyment, with discomfort, with the dawning realization that something was very wrong here. I'm Seraphina Gravesend, she announced to the theatre. This man kidnapped me. I'm being held here against my will. He bought me from my brother like I was cattle, and now. Draven started toward the stage, murder in his eyes. The theatre doors exploded inward. Theron burst through with 20 armed men, the local magistrate, and half the county militia behind him. He took in the scene instantly, Seraphina on stage, Draven moving toward her with violent intent, the horrified audience. Touch her, Theron said, his voice carrying through the sudden silence, and it will be the last thing you ever do. They say the Duchess of Ravencross has the most beautiful voice in England. She sings at Silver Hollow Manor now, in the music room that's alive again with sound and joy. She sings for Theron, for their friends, for the children who come to the school they founded, Melodia House, named for Seraphina's mother, dedicated to teaching music to anyone who wants to learn, regardless of birth or wealth. Lord Malachi Draven was arrested and convicted of kidnapping, illegal imprisonment, and fraud. He died in prison 2 years later. Lysander fled to the continent and was never seen in England again. Seraphina's inheritance was restored, every penny, which she promptly donated to establish 3 more music schools across Yorkshire. On warm summer evenings, if you pass by Silver Hollow Manor, you might hear singing, sometimes the Duchess, sometimes the Duke, who has a surprisingly pleasant baritone, sometimes the chorus of students from Melodia House. The windows are always open now, letting the music spill out across the grounds. And in the old music room, among Ophelia's drawings and books, there's a new portrait, Seraphina in her wedding dress, holding a single red rose, singing. Theron commissioned it from the finest painter in London, and it hangs beside the pianoforte where she performs every morning. Because some voices are meant to be free. Some songs are meant to be shared. And some loves are worth fighting through snow and darkness and fear to find. The house that grief silenced is full of music again. And the songbird who forgot herself found her voice, and her home, at last. Lysander and Draven aren't just historical villains, they're people who treat others as property, believe money buys consent and use power to control the powerless. Like, comment and share if you oppose such cruelty.